And we're live. Welcome back, everyone. Onan and Midnight Philosopher today. How are you today, Midnight?
I'm doing fine, thanks, Onan. Always good to join you on a Monday afternoon.
Yeah, I was not sure if it's gonna work today. I had a machine I rented over the weekend that ended up giving having some mechanical problems. So otherwise, I might be out tearing trees down. So I guess
hmm
this is the next best thing to that.
Yep.
So the title of today's episode, if you will, is Reflections on Fatherhood, and I included changing seasons of marriage. You and I had thought it might be an appropriate time to talk about those things and maybe respond to some of our more common detractors
Yep.
uh, amongst our the departed traditionalists in our communities. Um, so Father's Day was this weekend. It was a lot of fun, and I had all but one of our kids with us, and so we got to hang out. I grilled. I guess that's sort of an American thing. I
hmm
My wife got some stuff, and I grilled. We actually grilled after mass on Sunday. I have a actually got this her for Mother's Day. I got a one of these Traeger flat tops. It's like the Blackstone thing,
Oh,
and
okay.
it's a big propane grill with a kind of a cast iron top on it, and cook sausage and eggs and pancakes and hash browns and all that kind of stuff. So that was fun. I got to do that, and uh, I haven't been drinking much for a while. I've been trying to watch my weight, but
hmm
I cracked a few cold ones, so that was kind of nice to enjoy the day. How about you? What
Yeah.
did you do?
Very cool. Yeah, my one of my uncles nearby hosted sort of just a get together in his backyard, and he also he did the grilling and stuff, and then there were a couple of cakes. Some of my relatives got a like a posthumous birthday slash Father's Day cake for my dad. So
Oh,
yeah, so I think anytime it's a Mother's Day or Father's Day, there's usually an element of like remembering the parents that have passed. So that was pretty cool to like remember my dad and also all the uncles there that are dads or all the my cousins that are dads. So it was pretty nice and lively, and got to hang out with some of the nieces and nephews and attempted to play badminton. I'm not the most coordinated person, but it was still fun.
well, that's good. Well, I have sort of the range of kids. Still got the little ones, although this is, I mean, I think we're kind of done having kids, barring some I don't know, change of circumstances or an oops on our part. So
Mhm.
our youngest is almost 3, which is crazy. Like this is the first time since we got married over 20 years ago that we
Mhm.
haven't had either a baby or being pregnant
Mhm.
and all that. And that's something I want to talk about because um, it's really now that I've been able to observe how much of an impact. I'm not saying it's bad, but how much of an impact having sort of a constant supply of little children around, or when you're in that season, when you have the littlest kids, the pregnancy, the babies, newborns, toddlers, it really does, at least for us, at least, and maybe our kids tend to be more high strung, if you will. They don't just sit on the floor and play with toys, like they're into something.
Mhm.
That for us is really, really, I want to say, uh, influence the dynamics of our family. I would say it's definitely influenced the dynamics of my marriage and how my wife and I have sort of tried to cultivate our relationship, oftentimes kind of unsuccessfully
Mhm.
during that time. And now that we're kind of, I feel as we, for the first time, just kind of catching our breath a little bit. I definitely noticed in my wife how much I, I'm seeing glimpses of my wife that I haven't seen since we were engaged, and
Mhm.
it's crazy. So I'm really enjoying that right now. Parenting is a wonderful grind, but it definitely is a grind, especially I
Mhm.
think when the children are very young.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of, I think it was yesterday's episode, right? Jonah had brought up that he on a road trip with his wife, and then they were just talking as friends,
Yes.
and that was like a it was a feeling that he had forgotten, and then there was a kind of nostalgia about that, and it was a touching moment to sort of rediscover the, I guess, stuff that might have been from the dating or engagement phase.
Yeah, and he and I talk quite a bit kind of off air, if you will, about things, and we have little different situations, but we often remark about how similar our wives are in terms of sometimes it's like we marry the same woman, sort of, but it's amazing how marriage has ebbs and flows, good and the bad. But I think we would both say that we really feel our marriages are at kind of a high point now.
That's
And
really great.
yeah, um, and we talk about how much has happened in our relationships in the last couple of years, really because of the very things that we talk about on the podcast and some of the more notable events that happened, specifically to me, that triggered conversations, for in both of our marriages, that eh, it's not as if it's been just smooth sailing since then, but there's just been enormous progress or recovery. I'm not sure what's the best way to describe it, of our relationships. And, I think he's been married 15 or so years, 12,
Mhm.
15 years. I've been married almost twice that, but, you know, it's something to, it's just something to really keep in mind, especially if you're in that, if marriage is a real grind. I mean, you do have those seasons, and we still have those to some extent, but something happened in the last few years that really, really, I think, brought our marriage, our family life forward, in many ways, and so we're kind of enjoying the fruits of that now. It's really, really kind of wonderful.
Yeah, that's really good. And if you're supposed to know them by their fruits, I think the uncharted Catholic man approach might be onto something, you know?
Well, not everyone agrees. I get it's funny how people get fixated on little points of disagreement, and the names I get called over on Twitter
Mhm.
on completely benign, unrelated issues because of some of the more, occasional or maybe not so occasional, uh, edgy things that I've said or have been attributed to me. Um, so yeah, but it's hard to please everyone, so you just got to do the best to, be true to yourself and form your conscience and just, try to be the best version of yourself that you can be.
100%. I know that the haters are gonna call you a gooner, but
Mhm.
I liked, Steve Skojek's guess that the G word was Giga Chad, so I
That's
think
pretty
that's
funny.
more that was great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hope one day that we can, in a friendly manner, coerce Steve to jump on either this channel or Uncharted Catholic Man, because I think he definitely has a I think he has interesting takes in a broad spectrum of issues, the liturgy wars, church politics, but then also I think, like, reading in between the lines, he might have some interesting, insights into marriage and fatherhood as well.
Well, I have an open invitation to him, on
Mhm.
either channel. What's interesting about Steve is now he's changed a lot more than I have, for sure. But I still remember my first encounter with Steve was the old Steve, probably was pushing 10 years ago now.
What was that? When he was still running his publication?
He was yeah he was peak trad. Um, the one thing that stands out in my mind is he was running his mouth pretty hard about Supich, who I'm not a huge fan of Supich, but I interjected myself into a conversation. I said, "Well, come on, you're still a priest," and I don't know if he blocked me or whatever, but
Mhm.
that was I remember seeing Steve at kind of his peak tradness, and then to see kind of where he's come. I mean, I feel bad for the guy. He's been through, uh, a lot, and I know he's still struggling. So if you guys can spare a prayer for him and his family, and I think maybe even he may even have some sort of, I don't know, assistance going on over in Substack or whatever. But
Hmm.
keep Steve. I mean, I from what I've been able to tell, and I've never had a one-on-one conversation with him, but I can sense and relate a little bit to some of the struggles that he's gone through. We have similar sized families, and our kids are kind of spread out similarly, and so I can certainly empathize and relate to some of the things that he wrestles with, albeit in a much more crisis situation that he's dealing with.
Hmm. Yeah.
So I have, I think I mentioned this on Twitter last week, and just I don't think, to my knowledge, no one that follows me on this channel in particular knows me personally or anything like that. But in case there is, before I talk about this, I want to just give a little bit of a disclaimer. Um, what I'm going to talk about here, if you know me and if you know my family, don't spread anything that I talk about here in this particular in this episode to anyone. We're kind of keeping it close to the vest. So with that in mind, um, my wife and I are heading out to California in a few days for our oldest son's sort of uh, came up quickly, his wedding. He's getting married, and I'm not going to go into the details of it, other than it'll be fodder for the haters. But it's our first kid. Uh, he's our oldest, and quite frankly, isn't what we expected. Uh, but he's grown a lot since he's been in the military, and so we're going out. We've actually never met her, but we've um, been on. My wife messages her quite a bit, and been on FaceTime and stuff like that. And she's a foreign descent too, so that's kind of fun. I'm really excited to go out and meet my future daughter-in-law, and all that. And so it does feel like a season change for us to be
Hmm.
going in, but at the same time, still have a 3-year-old at home, so I'm still dad.
Yeah, for sure. And if they welcome kids soon, I guess your youngest will be a very young auntie.
Yeah, it's crazy to think about. I mean, I think I don't think he's going to be in a position where it would be prudent to have children anytime soon. But it wasn't for us either, and that didn't stop us. So um, we'll see. It could be interesting. But I will say the thought of holding a baby grandchild sounds much more appealing to me than holding my own. Not the. I mean, that feeling never really goes away. There's something really special about holding a brand new baby, your brand new baby in your arms. But I've got to experience that enough, and the next time it happens, I hope it's a grandchild.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. There's a sentiment in my family's from the Philippines, and there's a sentiment that roughly translates into grandchildren are sweeter. That's more or less the translation of the phrase. And I think the implication of that phrase is like, after you've gone through your own journey of parenthood and you've learned all the ups and downs, by the time you get to grandchildren, it's like you have this wealth of experience that you can sort of impart on the situation, and also in the way that you relate to your grandkids. But your kids at least get to take care of the day-to-day nitty-gritty, so you don't get bogged down by the grind aspect, but you can kind of just enjoy that deep personal relationship with the youngest member of the family.
I think that's a lot of it. I think there's something you get to sit down and enjoy this wonderful little creation for a few hours or a couple days, and then you get to go back to your life, and they get
Hmm.
someone else deals with all of the nitty gritty that
Yeah.
goes with
And
raising.
maybe you don't have as much of a disciplinarian role because that's your kid's responsibility, so you can sort of just
Yeah,
dote on the grandchild.
yeah. No, I'm. I mean, I'm not in a hurry for that, but I definitely am looking forward to it. Like, it's strange, and it did coincide. It really has coincided with our kind of discernment and thought process over the last probably year or so, where I think we've really become very much at peace with the thought that we're probably done having kids.
Hmm.
Still not through the fertile ages from what we could tell, but I think we're done actively trying to have children unless something changes, and so it's kind of a fun time. I mean, I'm really actually looking forward to going out and being the uh, father of the groom and meet our new daughter-in-law and things like that. So I'm kind of excited about it, and this will be the second time my wife and I get to go without kids. Um,
Yeah, that'll be cool.
yeah, so
Hopefully a second honeymoon of sorts.
well, the NFP chart looks to be much more conducive this time than the last time. So I'm um, not
That's
gonna
good.
not gonna lie. It's everything is kind of lining up. So I'm kind of
Yeah, that's
excited about that.
awesome.
So
Do you think Jonah's strategy of incorporating some literature will work in your favor, or that's not really your approach to things?
I I might just have that as a backup plan.
Hmm.
Um, we'll see.
Hmm.
It it really hasn't. Fortunately for us, that hasn't really been the challenge. The challenge is always finding an opportunity. Once the opportunity presents itself,
Hmm.
we've been very blessed and very just no problems there. But we'll see. It's going to be we'll have a few days uh, by ourselves. Of course, it's going to be busy, but you know, uh, I'm looking forward to having some quality time with my wife, and I think she's going to be much less anxious about this than when we went a few months ago for some work travel for me. So
Hmm.
yeah, really looking forward to it.
That's awesome.
Hmm.
You'll have to give us the play by play, or rather, like the recap when all is said and done. I think
Yeah,
it sounds like it's going to be a very happy occasion on multiple levels.
yeah, it. I mean, what do I say? It it it's going to be a happy occasion, and we're really looking forward to it. But it also would not be something that, let's say, my traditionalist family would be excited about, which is why we're not telling them. So we'll have to see.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, without getting too much into detail, I can totally understand, but I think we definitely have, as a culture, in Catholic culture and traditional culture, there are very useful guidelines for how to approach these, serious steps that we take in our lives. But I
Yeah,
think sometimes there are just a lot of logistical challenges in that's certainly played out in my own journey in my own marriage. And it's not like you're not completely rejecting the formula, but you sort of have to do things in a different order just because life throws you curveballs and you have to act fast at a practical level.
yeah. And I think one of the things I want to say, and I hope I can say this um, in the spirit that I mean it, but one thing that I think is very easy, it has been very easy for me as a Catholic, especially in the past, is it's very easy for our faith and sort of the rigorism that can come with it to really kind of suck the joy out of a scenario that isn't just all perfect all perfect, right? And that's something I've really had to struggle, kind of work through myself, is to find that line of not conceding your values, but also not letting the realities of life and the circumstances of people to make it impossible to just enjoy and be there with them and support them in the midst of, let's say, some reservations about what they're doing or how they're going about it.
Mhm.
And I think that's something, I think in particular a lot of Catholics struggle with, whether they realize it or not.
Yeah, no, I get what you mean. It is there. I think it was probably Pick and Choose that raised similar Similar comments about how a lot of the guilt and anxiety we feel about, the usual topics, it's really kind of externally enforced. It doesn't seem that we have an intuition to be this anxious about it.
Yeah.
Um, and I think kind of like, I think also Jonah on the episode, you know how, yeah, I think yesterday's episode he said something like, it shouldn't always have to be a grind in marriage, and as long as you're faithful to your lifelong monogamy with your spouse, and but within the bounds of marriage, and just the whole process of being married and discerning to be married, it's we there's already enough difficulty built into that whole journey. We don't need to stack more anxiety on top of it.
Yeah, and I think, and that's certainly one of the, I don't know, common criticisms. Our buddy Jonah 2.0 hasn't showed up in the comments yet, but I suspect he'll be here
Mhm.
eventually. Um, you know, one of the things that I often get accused of is trying to sanitize the suffering out of marriage and life, and maybe to some extent that's true, but I don't think that's really the best way to view it. I mean, um, I mean, I think that life is a sacrifice, and raising a family and having a spouse and being a citizen are all demands that, depending on the season, are sometimes it's easier and sometimes it's more difficult. There will be tears and laughing,
Mhm.
but I think it's very easy for us as Catholics to fall into this idea that unless it's wailing and gnashing of teeth, there's something wrong, and that I think is sort of a disturbing. Camera's gone again.
Mhm.
Can you still hear me,
Oh yeah.
Midnight?
Yep, I can hear you just fine. Can you hear me? Maybe some tech problems.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yep. I can hear you. I think I could always hear you, but I guess something
It
must have gone out on your end.
Yeah, it's as long as you can hear me. Yeah,
Mhm.
I don't know why. I don't know why this it happens every time. It's like, I don't know if it's my internet connection or whatever, but we're just gonna go with it. So
Yeah, no worries. I mean, I've had my own share of issues, like particularly with audio balance. Every time I do my weekly upload on my channel, so I think there's just sometimes a learning curve with all of this tech.
and I wish I could figure out what it is so that
Mhm.
I could like rule it out. So I'm not sure
Mhm.
which part to remove. I've got a great computer, got the Roadcaster. I don't know. I think it's my internet or something. But anyway,
Mhm.
we'll roll with it.
Yeah, no worries. But I think, yeah, you were on the idea of everything has to be wailing and gnashing of teeth or else something's wrong, and it's
Yeah.
kind of a disturbing outlook on things.
Yeah, and I I honestly struggle with this. I mean, I do genuinely, despite, I guess, my comments, I do struggle with what to make of all this, and am I falling into that? I don't think I am. I mean, if I'm answering honestly and sincerely, I don't think that's what I'm doing. Um, in part because anyone that knows me knows that, you just ask my wife. I'm not afraid of doing hard things. I do hard things that a lot of people are unable or unwilling to do. Now that's not I'm not here to toot my own horn or anything, but I'm just I know I can validate my capacity to do difficult and hard things in most areas of my life, including the intimate part of my life. But I also recognize when the difficulty reaches an absurd level, especially when it's avoidable, and especially when that is impacting other people, including children and spouses and stuff like that. And I think to me, I think that's one issue that just has to be, um, I don't know, at least given some attention. That I think too many Catholics just kind of gloss over and don't think about, because especially if you really get into the traditionalist mindset. Well, just keep pumping out babies, have big families, and everything will take care of itself. Well, maybe it doesn't. Maybe that's I that maybe that's not how it's supposed to be. Not for everyone, at least.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think the difficulty on the point about suffering, and I think I've messaged you and some of our friends about it quite a bit in the last few weeks, ever since like the Lent season and Triduum. But this idea of suffering being a recurring topic in homilies, but a sort of a darker view on suffering. Like one, it's like we deserve it because of the fall and our human condition, and then there's a sort of for lack of a better word, there really is a sense of a transactional element of suffering, that we do it to pay for past sins and make reparation for the sins of the world. And also just suffering is like validation of God's love for you. I think that's come from a few priests that I've come across, but also it's certainly something that Father Ripperger has sort of come back to, like either suffering or oppression from the devil is a sign of your closeness to God. So it's sort of like it makes it a source, suffering in and of itself, a source of validation. And the thing is, I don't think that's how humans in general operate. And even within like Catholicism, I don't think that that's how we should operate. And it, at least my my very armchair theologian kind of reading of the gospels is that the whole point of suffering is that there has to be this strong belief and faith that on the other side of that suffering is good, whether it's making a stand for a just cause, and that maybe it's something political, or in terms of family. It's just like maybe your spouse is sick, and that entails a lot of suffering in terms of how you redistribute responsibilities, and you have to be there for each other as you're going through a health crisis of some sort. And I think like to endure that suffering is out of love, not fear, not coercion, but it's just that there's a faith that on the other side of that suffering, it's like worth it. It's kind of like how we suffer in the gym because the idea of health or taking care of our bodies or losing some weight, we have confidence that the end result of choosing this difficult path um it will bring something greater, and it's not like it shouldn't be suffering for its own sake.
Yeah, and I think that's especially true within the context of marriage and family, because raising children, I mean, it's one thing if you're just a couple. I mean, I think it's especially one thing if you're a single person, whether you're or a priest or a monk or nun. I mean, maybe that's part of your charism. Um, maybe that's part of your life. But I don't think that's necessarily true or good for married couples, especially when you have children, because someone told me, and I'm going to butcher this, but they kind of say, um, you could spend a lifetime trying to pass good habits or good virtues onto your children, and they never really get it, but they will. Seems like they will remember that one time that you fall and exhibit bad behavior or vice or whatever. You know, and I think there is something sort of to be said for that. And why I'm saying that is because I think to be a really good parent all the time, not just some of the time or even most of the time, but really to be a really good parent all the time takes an enormous amount of stamina and self reflection and growth and humility that um, is hard, right? And it's what Joan and I often talk about is it is um, much, however you want to look at it, it's either much easier to be that person for your children when your personal life with your spouse is good, often through intimacy. Or on the other hand, it's much harder to do that well when your marriage, your relationship is is suffering because of one or more things, some of which is just maybe outside control, relationship dynamics, things that spouses bring to the marriage because of childhood and stuff. But some of it is just self inflicted on us as Catholics that, whether you like it or not, impacts the dynamics of the family and our ability to raise our children well all the time.
100%. I totally agree with you. And it kind of highlights a couple of like contradictions or tensions in the traditional way because on the one hand, um well, there seems to be a disdain for pleasure and intimacy without the possibility of procreation. And yet you have things like marital debt which strongly imply that sex is absolutely a need. And then but with the, forbidding other acts and birth control, with the exception of NFP, if some people want to consider that birth control, but with basically limiting the amount of tools you have to sort of space out children. um and so you're sort of setting yourself up for many pregnancies, maybe more than you could handle. But at the same time, technically speaking, I remember that live stream of, Tim Gordon and Father Ripperger, where they're saying that spouses need to prioritize each other over the kids. But how can you practically do that if you have 7, 8, 9, 10 kids? I mean, if you're always going to prioritize each other, there's a good chance that some of the kids will be neglected. But then if you have to prioritize the kids, because of course they're the most vulnerable members of your family, they're still just coming to terms with consciousness and being a part of the world. Well, then the spouses are going to neglect each other. So it's just, you're sort of booby trapped into a whole host of difficulties.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree with that, and I mean, there is a, I don't know if it's a conflict, but there is a definite tension between some of these traditional norms of, and I think in a special way this um you know this idea that parents should just, I don't know, just be willy-nilly but just almost robotic about having children, and yet also this idea of the fewness of the saved and stuff like that. I mean, to me, especially if the Rippagers of the world are right, and that salvation is a very difficult thing. To me, that just puts makes an even stronger case for the need for responsible parenthood than the sort of humani vitae crowd, which is, that's one of the, just ask our buddy John Farrell, is, you know the we can't be responsible parenting and all that is a modern convention. I don't know how
Mhm.
you reconcile those two things. Maybe someone can explain it, but I just think parenting is a major undertaking, whether it's one, two, or nine, and especially when there's eternal salvation on the line, both for you and your spouse and also your children. That I just don't understand how we can have such a just a flippant, kind of flamboyant approach to sex that really disregards or rejects any notion of responsible parenting or fostering the good of the marriage outside of procreation with all of that.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think the misapprehension by, your detractors on Twitter who call you that magical G word is that there's this complete misrepresentation of how, you lack reverence for procreation, but it's actually the opposite. It's because you appreciate the enormity of procreation that you sort of have to be in a good spot to get on that roller coaster, whether it's the first time or the fifth time. There has to be a certain amount of, preparing yourself for the ups and downs rather than just throwing yourself into the storm. It's such a big journey, and it's I think there's a huge difference between being, married in the long term, lifelong monogamy, and making decisions to shape your intimate life as well as plan your family out, versus like, you know, using all methods of birth control and just participating in hookup culture. Like the two are not morally equivalent.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, y- you know, I, I could say just in my own personal experience that, you know, our youngest three kids are, we have three daughters at the end, and they range in age from 7 down to 3. And I've been having so much fun, like being a dad to those girls. I mean, it's not always easy. They kind of
Mhm.
drive my wife crazy,
Mhm.
but I just have so much fun with those girls, and I have, I would say, a much more patience, and I've just seen more things. Like I have a better intuition about things, um, that I didn't have when our older kids were youngsters. And I think, I was an inexperienced parent. I mean, no one shows you how to do this. No one tells you how to do it. You just kind of stumble along, and you're doing the same thing with marriage. No one really tells you how to do it. There's just a lot of trial and error along the way. So your trial and error as a spouse, your trial and error as a parent,
Mhm.
and you just one of the reasons I wanted to talk about this is, you know thinking about my oldest son. He was our guinea pig, if you will. One of my earliest memories of him is, he was, God, he must have been only a week old. I was still in school at the time, and we had this new baby, and we were leaving for the summer to go back home. And my wife and I were at the post office. Back then, you still had to go to the post office to do this, so we're gonna have all our mail forwarded, and he has a poop bomb. It just starts. She's changing his diaper. We're changing
Mhm.
his diaper, and it's going out all over the place. And it, I mean, we're freaking out, and then we're laughing. But we have this memory of this little baby that we had for like a week. And
Mhm.
but once we had him, and then we had another one and another one. Um, I I love my son, and I think we don't have a bad relationship, but I'm not especially close to him in a
Mhm.
way that I am with the younger kids. And I that there's a lot of factors there, but I do think that once you start having kid after kid after kid, the younger kids tend to take your attention. And the older kids, I really do feel that one of the consequences, if you will, of having a large family is the older kids, when they got to that teen years where they really needed dad. My wife and I were so busy changing diapers and keeping toddlers out of the highway that I missed that.
Mhm.
And so i- it's something I've been reflecting on as I go out. I really, if I'm being honest, I never really had a chance to really talk to him about life and marriage and things like that. Maybe he listens to the podcast, I don't know, but I don't feel like I had an opportunity to develop that bond and that connection with him and some of the older kids that you really need to have to be able to instill these kinds of really uh, important life skills and knowledge that I hope I'm going to be able to do with the younger kids. But I think it's something that, I mean, it's a reality, and hopefully, despite all that, he will find a way to live his life well and to live his marriage well, and when he has kids, to be a good dad. But it's I don't know that I really had an opportunity to arm him with the things that I wish I could have, had I had just more time or attention or just wisdom.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I hope, now that he's entering into marriage, very soon, I hope he'll still feel comfortable enough to maybe send you a text message or give you a call and say, "Hey dad, like I could really use your insight on this one thing that's come up between me and my wife." Hopefully he'll still be able to, he can kind of reach out when he needs to.
Yeah, I hope so, and I'll maybe see if I can pull him aside. But and again, it's not that we have a poor relationship, but we don't have a close relationship, right? And so I don't think
Mhm.
it's. I think you have to have that closeness, almost a friendship with someone,
Mhm.
to be able to talk about the kinds of things that we talk about.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I say that as someone who never had those conversations with my father, right?
Mhm,
And so maybe what I'm after here isn't really normal or attainable. I'll be curious to see what Jonah 2.0 thinks, because I know he had he grew up in a much larger family, but I just I don't know what the answer is, but I think it's especially prevalent in large families. I think for that type of connection, that closeness and relationship that you need
mhm.
sometimes doesn't show up until it's too late.
Yeah. I think one practical thing that, we if, to encourage among Catholics, which seems to be no problem with my non-religious friends, is just if you could encourage people to really discern and give them the trust that they can decide how much they can handle or how often they can handle. Like I think it's been a lot that I've shared, like, this person is getting married, this person is having a baby. I've shared that a lot with the group. And all of these people that I had mischaracterized, I didn't expect them to have kids. And the common denominator is they just they needed to do things for themselves, get their relationships established, maybe find some financial stability,
Mhm.
and now they're ready to welcome kids. And I still have, like, I have much younger friends that they're, again, not super religious, and they're still in the middle of college, but some of them, they're excited about the idea of having 4 or 5 kids. They're not there yet, but it's I think all of these things that we, whether it's other acts or, you know to always clarify, anytime I refer to birth control, I'm always referring to things that do not result in any kind of harm to the unborn. So
Yeah.
whether that's
Yeah.
condoms, just anything that's, no harm, assuming no harm to the unborn child.
Mhm.
I just think that for most people that aren't burdened with, our particular set of rules, I think they really do just take these as tools, with that understanding of life throws you curveballs. It might take you a while to find a place to live, find a place to work, to find, just kind of get things stabilized within your marriage, and then you can welcome life. I think that's really the big debate here. It's the difference between, can we use the tools that, humans have been manipulating nature for as long as we've been around, and can we trust ourselves, or can the institutional church trust us, with that responsibility? Because it ultimately, whether you're using other acts and birth control or not, I mean, you're the one still making the calls in terms of how you approach family life. And can we sort of remove all of the afterlife anxiety and the threats of heresy? And I mean, just looking all around, I find, I find that people are not giving up on family life. It's just everybody's got a different set of circumstances, and they kind of need to figure out how much they can handle at that given time.
Yeah, and I think for me and my wife, I mean, we certainly did not expect or plan to have as large a family as we did when we first got married. But, you know, we've changed over time, and I think I know you asked my wife, she would never trade a single one of our children, and I wouldn't
Mhm,
either. Maybe we'd have more. I kind of, I wish we were in a situation where we could have that double digits. I mean, that'd be kind of fun. But,
mhm,
for the first well, for the majority of our marriage, but certainly when things were being, we started having kids right away, and kept having kids, and we wanted kids, but it wasn't so much whether we wanted kids, but we really couldn't have them on a timing that was probably practical and prudent for us. Like we really a lot of our family planning decisions, especially early on, were a product of hell avoidance measures, if we're being honest.
mhm,
Because with NFP, you know, you let's say you give into sex, um, because the alternatives are, you know, sinful, if you will.
mhm,
And I've never liked that. I've never liked the fact that some of the most important decisions of our life were impacted almost directly by our feeling we really have no other alternatives than to just sort of give in or take chances. And anytime we took chances, we always got pregnant. In looking back in hindsight, fine. I mean, I wouldn't. I don't know if I trade anything, but I can't also or just ignore and overlook just kind of how crappy that was. Just being um living out of fear rather than living with purpose. I think that's really the thing about it is so much of what got us to where we are was because we were afraid of God, we were afraid of the church, we're afraid of hell more
Yeah,
so than
yeah,
man,
mhm.
we've been so blessed, let's add more children to our life. And maybe that's by design. I'm not saying it can't be it, but I don't think we just should assume that that's how it's supposed to be, and God just cares that we have lots of kids, not that we do it with good intention and purpose and planning.
Yeah, 100%. Like, I think the difficult thing is, I think there's I hope I'm not butchering this, but in general, I think the Father Ripperger types and just the traditional types are always talking about how we need to sort of reform our inner disposition about things in life, and I'm not disagreeing. Like, I think I think we could always engage in some self-reflection and see if we need to check our attitudes about various components in life. But I think marriage is such a huge thing that you can't sort of coerce yourself into a state of readiness for kids if you're just not there. I think it's good to look at the ideal and keep reflecting on how can, whether it's materially or emotionally or spiritually, how can you get yourself to a state of openness, not just in a technical mechanical sense, openness to life, but like emotionally, can you internally get yourself to a place of you're ready to welcome new life and you're ready to be a parent, whether the first time or again. um but it's like they kind of coerce you into like just jumping into the ice bath and hoping that your inner disposition will change. And maybe for some people they can rise to the challenge, but I think there's just so many factors that people might not always be ready. And like you said, it doesn't really help that if they feel the church or they feel God breathing down their neck that they have to take a course of action, because then it kind of corrupts the motivation. Like you said, that becomes fear based as opposed to love based, or wanting to grow by taking on the journey of parenthood.
Yeah, and I know from I mean one of the reasons we have a podcast is because when Jonah and I started chatting as friends, we were both coming from places of extreme suffer and anguish within our marriages. Not that I don't know what's a good marriage and a bad marriage, but we had marriages that were hurt a lot. Like there was a lot of pain with that, and I think in no small part because the tolls of parenthood, especially when you're sort of pushed into parenting faster more often than you might choose for yourself, um, take their toll on the relationship. I mean, our marriage was pretty damn unpleasant for a long, long time, or a lot of the time. In not because we were bad people, or I didn't love my wife, or my wife didn't love me, but we were just so I don't know tired from the demands of this life and this fruitfulness that was part of our marriage that um I mean looking back now it's a little easier for me to be like yeah, it it was worth it. I mean I probably wouldn't have the marriage I have now if we hadn't gone through that. So I do struggle with that because I think there is some merit in suffering. I think there is some merit in struggle, like going to the gym and doing hard things for a while. But there is still a price to that. And like I said, I come back to my especially my older few kids. I just I think that because we were just new and trying to figure it out and trying to avoid hell, and our marriage was just kind of uh, just left to starve for a while. I think some of our kids, especially our older kids, missed out on the type of Catholic uh, home that we actually they actually want and need. I think that's what I'm really trying to say here. Is I think it's extremely difficult to have a truly good Catholic marriage and truly good Catholic home and a place for children to grow up in the best possible way when you're in this situation where parenting is just kind of a hell avoidance scenario.
100%, because ultimately, whether consciously or unconsciously, I think the way that the parents perceive God is going to sort of seep into how the kids will eventually perceive God. Um, just by example, I think just kids are very sensitive. I think you and Jonah have talked at, very in various variations of the idea of kids are very sensitive when something's not quite right between mom and dad. And then I think that I think also, if something's not quite right between the parents and their relationship with God and faith, I think the kids would also pick up on that.
I sure think so. I mean, I do believe that's true, and that's why the older I get, and the more time and experience I have as a husband and as a father, I think this is why I tend to take a just slightly less rigid position than I used to, and certainly a lot of the trads. It just doesn't seem um, conceivable to me that that our God is this just rigid figure, just throwing countless souls to hell when this is the environment that we're all kind of growing up in and struggling our way through without any real kind of playbook or manual, right? I mean,
Hmm.
and that's why I just tend to um, not get so bent out of shape about a lot of the stuff, and I hope I'm right about it. I mean, I mean, I haven't excised all of the trad from my blood, but I feel in the to the with the strongest conviction I can have about anything that God has to be a more loving father than is depicted, I think, in traditional circles.
I would say so too. I just think I think that it just opens a whole host of problems. Just looking at like all of the the anxieties caused by traditional culture, and also just hearing the testimonies of people like Steve Skojek or Kevin on Tradicath about how eventually that approach to faith can really push people away if and I don't mean for this to sound too arrogant, but I think the people within traditionalism who are really deep thinkers, and they try to put two and two together and the implications of all of this heavy-handed theology, I think you can't really be a deep thinker and persist in traditionalism, like in a really deep sense. Maybe that's a misjudgment of a lot of people who stay in traditionalism, but I feel like the or maybe let me rephrase that a little bit. You can't think deeply and feel deeply. And by feel, I don't just mean like unregulated emotion, but I mean a deep sense of empathy for various people. I think you do have to sort of, maybe there's an element of empathy as a sin among traditionalists, because sometimes some of the things they've said to Kevin on Tradicath or Steve Skojek, and then even how people interact with you on Twitter. I think there's almost like a limit to how much empathy they're allowed to have for other people.
Yeah, and I don't know if that's a product of things, or if that's just a coping mechanism to avoid, I guess, avoid. I think there is just some sort of an inherent conflict that arises if you just kind of take all these different positions and try to hold them together. I mean, I think, and so I think for a lot of people, that's the way to avoid the conflict, is to just kind of reject the emotions, reject kind of that feeling, those deep natural feelings you have, as being these are incompatible with what I believe, have been told to believe, and I'm not going to. If I have to give up one, I'm going to give up my feelings, right? That human sort of intangible things that we have, and I understand why, and I've been there,
Hmm.
but it's again, I don't. I mean, I by the fruits you will know them. It's hard not to see some of the poison fruit that seems to come out of that
Hmm.
approach, and I don't know.
Yeah, it's tough. Just to respond to Jonah, I know that my claims about traditionalists was pretty broad and sweeping, and I maybe I should reel it in back. It's just I feel like I've come across kind of enough of that sort of lack of empathy to suspect that it's more true than it's not. And I don't want to paint too much. There's a lot of good, sympathetic, kind-hearted people in the traditional communities, but at least some of the most outspoken members, they do seem to have a kind of a cold, calculated logic, and any deviation from that logic is just kind of anathema. So I think that can really a really harmful approach to the spiritual journey.
Yeah, and I want to respond to this comment. Like, I mean, I think the trouble, if you will, is and I'm an idealist, and I've used to be much more of an idealist. You know, we live on a homestead. I mean, we do a lot of the things that I think Jonah 2.0 uh, aspires to or thinks we need, and I but I have just come to find that trying to make really any kind of significant changes or improvements in society and your lifestyle, whatever, it just becomes increasingly more difficult the more kids you have and the larger your family is because for a long time, for a number of years, we moved to the country, and I was so passionate about kind of living that homesteading life and raising our own vegetables and all that kind of stuff. But I missed out on so much with our kids because they just weren't really into it. And I realized at some point in time, much too late, that I was giving up my relationship with my children to have this dream I had to kind of live this pure type life, this quality life that would make the world and society better. And if my kids grew up without a dad they loved and trusted, what did it gain me? I mean, if they're going to just go off and live like everyone else anyway. So we really scaled back, and not that I don't think those things are valuable, and I kind of hope we can return to those. I think, again, I think the demands that we have and should have for ourselves, the expectations we should have ourselves with that very noble role of being parents, I think for the most part just makes survival a full-time job, much less trying to make society better somehow. And maybe I sold out. I don't know, but I'm becoming more of a realist as I get older and a little less of an
Mhm.
idealist. Maybe you're just not old enough quite yet, Jonah 2.0.
And I think that's important. I think it's good to have dreams and ideals and various, without getting too much into detail. But yeah, even in my own like educational and career choices, I think it started from a place of love and idealism. And while that hasn't like that hasn't disappeared, I still, I still love what I do. But like you said, I think it's always this back and forth between you have to take practical considerations
Mhm.
into account and just the way the economy works and the way life throws you curveballs and it's not that you lose your love for your dreams or your ideals, but you sort of have to adapt and you might have to take on certain tasks or make adjustments that you weren't foreseeing, but you can't just sort of it's not always practical, and in fact, it can even be harmful if you just white knuckle it through and force your ideals to fit a reality that's, kind of complex. And as Pick and Shoes pointed out, we sort of have to adapt to the brokenness of our nature and the dysfunctions of our world. And of course, we don't lose hope that we can have a better tomorrow, but we do have to sort of adapt, and that's one of the strengths of our species is our capacity to adapt.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. I totally agree with that. And um, so I think, and I think the other thing I would add to that is this. I think it's easy to just kind of take for granted or just kind of overlook kind of the enormous um, gift to society you're given by having children. I mean, it's peop people are so resilient. Parents are resilient. The stuff that we do every day without really thinking of it, dying to yourself, going to your job, going to your kids' stuff after school, up in the middle of the night, cleaning up barf, all the stuff that we do to give these new people, these unique souls, the opportunity to have the life that God has in mind for them is such a powerful thing and a huge undertaking that I think we should all just kind of remind ourselves, regardless of your state in life, and even if you don't have children, you are bringing a tremendous value to society, even in the midst of our own circumstances and brokenness, and that God is probably pleased with that, especially if we're approaching it with a sincere and joyful heart.
Hmm. Absolutely.
So, boy, that went by fast. I actually have to get going here. I got to go home and grill some food up for the family. So, I'll allow a couple more comments or give you a chance to kind of wrap it up, but then I'm going to have to head out of here.
Yeah, sounds good. Gotta fire up that Traeger grill. Yeah,
Yeah.
about like 10-ish years ago, my dad also had we got one of those wood chip grills. I think there was a big promotion in Costco
Mhm.
many, many years ago, but yeah, those are pretty fun.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe once my kids are a little older, I'll turn into the smoker guy. But for now,
Hmm.
I'm about quantity and
Efficiency, I guess.
yeah,
Yeah.
efficiency and quantity, and so that's kind of where we're at right now. And I'm enjoying it. And I really like cooking. I like cooking for our kids and cooking for my wife and things like that. So
Yeah.
yeah,
That's cool. No, there's something pretty I think there's something that can be pretty therapeutic about grilling and you're outdoors and preparing food. There's just something so primal and so therapeutic about it.
yep. It was more fun when I was a little younger and I could do it
Mhm,
by enjoying one of my favorite cans of beer. But now I don't.
mhm.
Like I said, I don't drink too much these days. But it is therapeutic to kind of be out in the country and watch your kids playing and
Mhm.
just enjoy the gift of food and company.
Yeah. Cool, cool. We have a little just a late arrival, SFX Monster, so just hello there to SFX Monster. Thanks for being a supporter of the Onan project here.
Yeah, I really do enjoy these live streams, and
Mhm.
if anyone wants to like participate in these, let us know. I mean, we can invite you. StreamYard has this option where we could show all the comments on the stage, and they just kind of scroll by. I might,
Mhm.
maybe we should start doing that. That'd be kind of fun just to have them scrolling.
Yeah, that would be pretty cool. Yeah, I'm learning a lot, like, just doing these, more or less weekly or every couple weeks
Yep,
streaming with you. I
yep,
think I definitely hope to do something similar on the Midnight Philosophy podcast
yep.
channel. I've just been putting it off for a lot of things. Maybe in a couple of months I'll join you and then I'll pick a day and then you can hop on my channel once I get savvy to this stuff.
That'd be awesome. Be happy to do it.
Yeah. One little selfish plug. I think SFX Monster, I think you might have been the one to message me that video about Brian Holdsworth
Oh,
and like, yoga pants and stuff. So just shout out to SFX Monster that you helped bring about the video that I'll hopefully upload by tonight at midnight. So yeah, just thanks SFX Monster for your suggestion.
yeah, thank you, and thank you, Midnight, for joining me. I always enjoy these conversations.
Mhm.
Check out Midnight Philosopher over on YouTube. You got some pretty great videos over there. I'm a couple behind, but every so often I'll sit down and do them. Fortunately, they're not super long, so they're not. You don't need a ton of time to sit down and listen to them, and they're very well done. So I appreciate
Yeah.
the work that you're doing. I'm glad you have been doing that, and wish you all the success with that. So,
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, you and Jonah and Kevin on Tridicath really kind of
yeah,
inspired me to just hop on the bandwagon and
yeah,
think out loud. It's not perfect. I'm sure I probably put my foot in my mouth from time to time, but just thinking out loud and just putting some ideas out there for conversation.
And maybe old Jonah 2.0 can get off his duff and create his own channel
Hmm.
and spread his wisdom. So yeah. So with that, everyone, I appreciate everyone who showed up today. We should be back next week, and yeah. So thanks again, Midnight, and until
Yeah,
next
thanks for
one,
having me, Onan. I'll see you
have a
soon.
good one.